Hi, this is Cindy Rubin. I am a pediatrician and breastfeeding medicine specialist, and I have a practice called In Touch Pediatrics and Lactation in the near west suburbs of Chicago. And this is Keeping in Touch. This is a weekly show with all sorts of snippets of information on anything from breastfeeding medicine to general pediatrics topics to talking about direct primary care, which is the model that my practice is run under. So I hope you enjoy the show, and please make sure that you subscribe or like this channel if you are enjoying the content. And let me know if there are things that you have questions about that you'd like me to address on a future episode. I wanted to talk about poop. I think poop is probably a pediatrician's favorite subject, or at least we talk about it a lot. So I just wanted to talk about what kind of poop we worry about and what is okay. So newborns, as we know, have very soft poop. It starts out very black and tarry. And as a baby starts getting food, whether it be breast milk or formula, that poop starts to change. So it'll first be a little greenish, and then it will turn brown, and then usually yellow, seedy, very mushy poops. And that is the normal progression over that first week as a baby pushes out all of the black tarry meconium and starts to have real food. So that's typical in the beginning, and babies will often poop every single time they eat, if not more. And that is because babies have what's called a gastrocolic reflex, which is when something goes in their gut, there is a reflex to push something out of the gut to make room for more. And actually, we all have this reflex, but most of us either don't notice it anymore. We've learned to poop when it's an appropriate time to poop, not necessarily when we're sitting there at a meal, maybe, but really, ideally, we should listen to our body, and anytime we feel it, we should go. But we're not wearing diapers, so it's more appropriate for us to wait till we are in a place or it is an appropriate time to let it out. But babies just let it out when that reflex happens. So very common for it to happen during or right after meals for newborns. After a while, things start to change a little bit. Newborn, especially, well, either breastfed or formula-fed babies, really the poops can be almost any color of the rainbow, and most pediatricians are not going to care unless that poop is pitch black, kind of goes back to looking like that black tarry poop, but really black, or red, like bloody red. So it can be kind of orangey or a little red-ish, but if it looks like it is bright red blood of any sort or amount, we want to know about it. Or white. And I don't mean just lighter than usual, but like chalk, gray, white poops. We need to know about that. So each of those things could potentially indicate something different, but otherwise brown, orange, purple, yellow, green, none of those colors in and of themselves bother us at any age, really. Though they could indicate various things, certainly none of them are an emergency. So the next thing that often happens is poops will slow down, usually later in that first month or into the second month of life. Poops will become less frequent. Not always. Some babies continue to poop very frequently or with every meal, but especially breastfed babies, there's commonly a significant slowdown, and babies go from pooping like 8 times a day to more like once a day or every other day or every few days. I think the record that I've seen is about 21 days. So that's not normal in the first week, okay? But when a baby's a little bit older, about a month, not uncommon and not really anything to worry about. Babies feel when their gut is moving and maybe, thinking about having a poop, and they grunt and they groan and they turn red and all sorts of things that might make it look like they're uncomfortable or trying to have a poop, and then they don't have a poop and we get all worried that they're constipated. But especially if it's during this time and things have slowed down, but they're still eating fine and otherwise doing well, then there's no reason to think that they are constipated. It's probably just that typical slowdown. Now, formula-fed babies usually don't go that long, so I'd say they still usually stay on at least a daily, on average, schedule. But if it's spreading out a little bit, even in a formula-fed baby, I wouldn't be worried unless those poops start to turn into like harder, firm, rabbit pellet poops, anything like that. They're not mushy and soft anymore, then that could be an indication of what we consider constipation. And so that's a time to talk to your pediatrician about what maybe we can change to help with that. Same with a breastfed baby. Rabbit pellet poops would not be normal, but poop spreading out and not happening as frequently, but then when it does, it is soft, possibly blowout, but soft and like it was before is not a problem at all and is to be expected. Now, again, the colors can really range over the whole life of a kid if you really think about it, but especially when we're really seeing babies' poops frequently is when they are in diapers still. So it's over those first few years that we really notice things, and it's really those changes in color that we talked about that we worry about, or hard poops. Or once babies are eating solid foods, then sometimes we do see babies start going longer and having harder poops. So a baby, should still be pooping every 1 to 2 days, 2 days probably at the max. That doesn't mean that if they've gone 3 days, it's an emergency to go to the ER, but if they're regularly going more than 2 days in between poops, especially if those poops are then hard or seem painful to have, then I would contact your pediatrician to discuss that and see if there's anything more that needs to be done. And that's in a baby that's taking solid foods. As babies start taking solid foods, sometimes there is a little bit of a transition, and poops do change at that point to being more adult-like, more formed. They should still be soft, but maybe more formed, not as mushy, and may start to smell more like adult poop. You might start to see some undigested food coming through as well. All part of the normal process. Now, some babies do get constipated briefly and then kind of get out of that on their own. So, a little bit of constipation, those harder poops or more infrequent poops can be monitored as long as your baby otherwise doesn't seem to be in pain or vomiting or not eating well. It can be watched for a few days before potentially contacting your pediatrician. As babies get older and eat more of a variety of foods, we can see all sorts of odd things happen. So certain foods, as they are digested, especially in large amounts, can come out looking very interesting and not like what you expect. Let's say just going through a few of the things that I experienced myself with my kids were, so first of all, something like a raisin. Now, again, you may not be giving raisins until your babies are a little bit older because of choking hazard, but raisins are like dehydrated grapes, right? Well, when they pass through the digestive system, they become rehydrated and come out as bigger grapes, like more looking like grapes. So sometimes if my kiddo ate a lot of raisins, we'd see some of those coming through as more looking like kind of pieces of grapes coming out the other end. Cantaloupe. This was a really surprising one. My first baby, probably under a year old, ate a ton of cantaloupe one day. And then I think this was at his grandmother's house. And then we were driving home, the hour home from grandma's house, and we had a poop in the car. And it was like spinach. Like cooked spinach, like, the pack of frozen spinach that you'd get that's kind of cut up and processed. And that's what it looked like. And we weren't sure if he was sick or what this was. But then the next time he had cantaloupe, the same thing happened. So I have no idea why cantaloupe gets digested into something that looks like spinach, but That's what happened for our kiddo. And I feel like there were a few other foods that kind of came out looking similar. Another thing that can be surprising is bright green poop. Now that can happen sometimes when kids are sick, but we were on vacation once and suddenly my husband called to me that my kiddo had this bright green, crazy green poop. And we realized that it was blue dye. He had Superman ice cream, which was bright blue, and blue dye often gets digested into something green. And that became a not so uncommon experience in our house because my kiddo loves Superman ice cream. So now we know to be prepared. There are other things that can cause sudden changes that are transient. So illness can cause changes in color, usually mushier diarrhea, or just because the poop is moving through so quickly in kids with diarrhea, it often lightens up in color. So like very light brown, or sometimes green, fluorescent too, depending on what virus is causing this. But blood in the poops, in diarrhea, especially if a kiddo seems sick, bloody poop should be addressed with your pediatrician. Now, it still may not be something that needs treatment, and it still may go away on its own if it is part of the virus or bacteria usually that can cause bloody diarrhea, but it's still worth letting your pediatrician know that this is happening so that they can make sure that everything's okay and keep an eye on it. And sometimes it does require treatment. So those are the big ones. There's all sorts of other things. You can just see undigested pieces of food coming through all the time. And really, typically, these are just not things to be worried about. Those are typically the kind of the high fiber foods that, especially eaten in bulk, just don't really get digested very much, especially if your kiddo didn't chew very well. They might just make it through. Those are the basic changes and things that we see in poop and what to be worried about and when not to worry, and just expect a lot of variation. Also, as I said in the beginning, those, younger kids and babies, they do usually grunt and groan and turn red when they're having poops. And again, that doesn't mean it's constipation. That's normal. That's babies feeling what it feels like to have a poop, figuring out what that sensation means, figuring out how to coordinate, relaxing the muscle that needs to be relaxed to let the poop out. There's a lot of things that babies have to figure out how to do over those first few months of life that are totally normal and don't mean that there's anything wrong. So that is certainly something that you can bring up if you're worried about, but oftentimes you're going to hear that it's normal and to keep an eye on it and let your pediatrician know if anything changes, but part of the normal process. And then even as your kids get older, they still may do some grunting and groaning and pushing and turning red just because they're trying to figure it out and they're having poops in front of you, whereas you may be doing some of those things occasionally yourself, but nobody sees it, right? Sometimes we're just figuring things out or things don't happen quite the way they normally do, and that doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong, especially if it's a one-time thing. But seeing that happen is part of a kid's process of learning what's normal for their body and what it takes to let a poop out. And it's really hard poops, painful poops more than every couple of days in an older kid eating regular foods, poop that is bloody, whether it be when a kiddo is sick or if they're having hard poops and you're seeing blood on the poop, it could mean that it's really tearing the skin a little bit on its way out. All reasons to talk to your pediatrician to just address that and see what you can do to help with the constipation. Usually, depending on the age and the severity, the first thing I usually try is a little bit of prune juice. Just regular old prune juice. You can start with a half an ounce or an ounce if it's like a 1-month-old. So they'll probably talk to your pediatrician before you do it with a 1-month-old. But older kids, you could start with some prune juice, an ounce or two, and kind of move your way up as needed to help them get through a little bit of transient constipation. And then bloody, like red blood red poop, white poop, or black, pitch black poop are all things to definitely call your pediatrician right away, or potentially even go into the emergency room if it's over the weekend and you can't reach your doctor if you see that happening suddenly. So hopefully that is enlightening. Again, I love talking about poop. I could probably go on for hours more. So if you ever have questions, give me a call. Happy to talk about it with my kids all the time. Like, pediatricians are happy to talk about poop in the middle of meals. It's a world of poop out there. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's been helpful. If it has been, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And there will be more where this came from on our next episode of Keeping in Touch.